Peter, the president had to choose his words carefully last night.
You know, he did, Betty, and he has at every single step of this entire story, ever since Michael Brown was killed back in August. The president choosing his words extremely carefully, and he did so last night. Of course, before, he said he didn't want to tip the scales of justice, didn't want to have the presidential influence on the outcome of what the grand jury was deciding. But now the grand jury has spoken, and he urged Americans to respect the decision of the grand jury. He called for those protesters, as you mentioned before, to protest peacefully. He called for law enforcement as well to show proper restraint, to work with communities, try and address some of the simmering issues out there. But he also made clear that there are still problems with race relations in this country, still tensions between the law enforcement community and local communities as well. And he talked about that at some point, at some length last night. Take a listen to the president's message.
The situation in Ferguson speaks to broader challenges that we still face as a nation. The fact is, in too many parts of this country, a deep distrust exists between law enforcement and communities of color.
And he said the federal government can play a role in trying to bridge some of those tensions. He talked about the work that Attorney General Eric Holder and the Justice Department can do to try and foster better relations between law enforcement and local communities around the country, work that is ongoing. And of course, Betty, we've got to remember that there are still 2 federal investigations underway in Ferguson into what happened there. The government, the Justice Department, is investigating the actions by the Ferguson police force. Have they shown too much tendency towards excessive force, towards racial profile? That's one investigation. And then the separate federal investigation into whether or not Michael Brown's civil rights were violated by Officer Darren Wilson. It's a very high legal bar, and that was acknowledged even last night by the Attorney General in his own statement. But those 2 investigations are ongoing, and that is at least one thing that the family of Michael Brown, supporters of Michael Brown, as well as members of Congress critical of this decision, are watching for.
Peter, and it reminds me of the president and the comments he made in the Trayvon Martin case as well, and it raises questions, I believe, Peter, whether the president should be commenting at all on these cases. The same for Trayvon Martin, and here with Michael Brown.
Well, I think you've got to expect, Betty, the President of the United States, particularly the first African-American President of the United States, to weigh in on these issues. He can play a role that can, of course, foster a more peaceful resolution, perhaps, in the community there. His words make a difference. We know that. They can be healing. But there is a risk that the president is getting involved in a situation. That's why he has to choose his words so carefully. He struck a balance last night. I think, by and large, he probably didn't satisfy people on every side of this issue. But I don't think the president expected to be able to do that. And Betty, I don't think this ends here. I think you're going to hear the president talk about the Ferguson situation again, perhaps as soon as today, but over the course of the next weeks and months, perhaps even the final 2 years of his presidency.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. Our Chief Washington Correspondent, Peter Cook.